Welcome to Spark Infinity Office Hours. We've got another wonderful guest with us today. She has extensive experience in musical theater and she's an education veteran. She also happens to be the founder of Phoenix Inspired Coaching. Joining me today is Maria Foster.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Yes, I am a school counselor and a life coach with Phoenix Inspired Coaching, and I have 30 years of experience in the public education system. So, music education in public schools in Canada from kindergarten to grade 12 vary significantly across the country with disparities in regards to availability and quality. There's a 2012 study that looked at the state of musical education across the country. What they found was some communities had super robust programs with dedicated teachers and adequate funding, while others had no music programs or they didn't have teachers to teach them, they didn't have proper funding for them. And so that's what we're dealing with in regards to the spectrum. People who've got it all and people who don't have any or a little bit. So, what some of the challenges that we're facing in public education, and this is not just in music programs, is limited funding, insufficient resource, and a lack of qualified music instructors.
We've been hearing
Yeah.
about this for a while by now because they've been cutting all kinds of programs. And I'm sure by now we have some tangible measures of the way in which it's impacting kids or not impacting kids. So let's get into that side of things.
Yeah, so music education in public schools in Canada from kindergarten to grade 12, they vary significantly across the country with disparities in regards to availability and
Mm.
quality. There's a 2012 study that looked at the state of musical education across the country, and what they found was some communities had super robust programs with dedicated teachers and adequate funding, while others had no music programs or they didn't have teachers to teach them, they didn't have proper funding for them. And so that's what we're dealing with in regards to the spectrum. People who've got it all and people who don't have any or a little bit. Yeah. So, what some of the challenges that we're facing in public education, and this is not just in music programs, is limited funding and insufficient resources and a lack of qualified music instructors. Those are the three biggest challenges that we have in regards to musical education programs. And this results in students having unequal access
Yeah.
to great music programs. In 2022, there was another study done, and again, it echoes what was happening in 2012. So I'm going to say that provincial governments who are responsible for the funding of public education, not the federal government, they have not they don't understand what the impact is of not having robust music programs in school. And they don't understand what the connection is with great music programs and school success in other areas.
So it sounds like it varies considerably by province, and some provinces prioritize it more than others. In fact, it probably varies somewhat within provinces, even.
It's
But
both. It's across
okay.
the country and it's by province, and it's even you can break it down by school district. In school
Wow.
districts where you have a superintendent who's out to champion music because they understand the connection between music and cognitive development,
Yeah.
music and academic achievement, music and improved test scores, music and more kids graduating from schools with music programs and how it enhances social skills, working with the group, working with like in harmony. Like when you create harmony with music, you can't have one instrument being louder than the rest of them unless that's the focus of the piece of music. But all of that, like improved attendance to school, improved behaviors and discipline, improved cultural awareness. Like we're going to be doing a music on rhythms from Cuba or Latin America, or in our school that I'm working in now, we did a whole piece on music from China for the Chinese New Year, and the students performed a piece.
I mean, it sounds like all upsides and benefits. Do you have any thoughts on, or did you find anything about why it's being deprioritized?
Yeah, so one thing I did find out is I couldn't find a study or document from a reliable source that said that somehow music programs are detrimental
Hmm.
to students. That does not exist.
Right.
All that exists is positive connections and science-based connections and statistics on the value of having music programs in school. So, why is this happening across the country? I think what happens is that we prioritize academic courses like math and science and English and social studies. And when it comes to a lack of funding, which is done provincially, and then they gave the funding to the districts, and the districts decides how the funding is distributed. The first ones to get the shortest end of the stick are the programs like physical education, the programs like the music programs, the programs that are not academic focused. Those are the
Mm.
first ones to have those cuts. And so when I speak to music teachers currently who are teaching music, what they shared with me was that there are a couple of issues that are happening. For example, what teachers are sharing with me is that the number one issue is having an appropriate dedicated space for music classes.
Mm.
Often they're in shared spaces, which doesn't work because who wants to schlep 25 xylophones out for the next class that's coming in to use it? That doesn't work. Some teachers teach in rooms that are used for the lunchroom, like a cafeteria. So the tables are brought out and then the tables are folded up and put away, and that's where they teach. Often there's, leftover lunches or garbage that they're cleaning up, and that doesn't work. They often don't have spaces to store their instruments because they need class sets of recorders, violins, drums, something, because you need that to teach, to be able to teach kids with. The lack of funding for instruments, a lack of an appropriate space to teach, and a lack of qualified instructors. We have a teacher shortage right across Canada and globally. So if we have a teacher shortage in the academic subjects, we're going to have an even more profound teacher shortage in programs like music. And the other challenge that the teachers are sharing with me is that they want full-time jobs. So if it's a
Hmm.
part-time job, they don't want to take that. They want a full-time job. And so sometimes it's a half day here, 3 days there. They often work in one or two schools if they want a full-time job because they're not offering music as a full-time load.
Yeah, because you just as well might go and teach privately. I mean, I
You
did
can,
that. I was a guitar teacher for a really long time, and I'm pretty much retired from that world. Very, very rarely I'll take on a student, even now. But I know that even on about 40 students per week, you can make a pretty decent living depending on what studio you're teaching at or what you're personally charging to do it. So I think the temptation is generally to go that way. Places like Long and McQuaid, I have experience with, and they paid very well.
yes, I agree. You could set yourself up so that you could be a music teacher full-time and possibly make more money
Yeah.
and set your own hours and do that. What I don't see is a world without music. I have been fortunate that in most of my schools there has been a music program, and for some students that is what keeps them in school. They might not have an academic focus, or maybe they are really good at the academics and don't enjoy them. It's actually music that brings them more joy,
Hmm.
and that has them attending schools and be connected to the music teacher, the other music students. I know that in high schools they often travel, so you get to go on weekends with them and go to different competitions around the province. So they actually bond really well. They make lots of friends. They're a very tight community. And when we look at the impact of music on improved test scores and attendance and behavior in school, I can't see a reason why we wouldn't have a music program. It does enhance what we're up to in schools. And for some kids, that is their unique way of self expressing themselves. They might be students who don't have a lot of facility around words. They might be not so outgoing. And maybe it's through the horn or the trumpet or the drums, that they can express and connect with people at a completely different level, which is fantastic because 90% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah. To share a little bit from my story, and this show is not about me, but I was an academic misfit, so I loved art class and I loved music class in Japan growing up in elementary school. I didn't bother with music in junior high and high school because it seemed like it was band, not music class. I guess it's always the case that you have to learn something no matter what. If you take the classical curriculum, which many people do if they're pianists, you got to learn from that method. And if you're a guitarist, oftentimes you start off with something like the Hal Leonard method, which teaches you how to read. And reading is awful on guitar, by the way. I don't know if people know that, but it's the worst. It's not great. That's the much harder way to learn, I found out for myself. But I did start playing guitar while I was still in high school. And every spare minute that I could fill, whether it was lunch hour or a spare period where I didn't have a class, or sometimes even an art class because we were kind of left to our own devices, I would just play guitar a lot. And so, having had that opportunity, I don't know. I just can't imagine a world where that's not really encouraged or supported.
Extracurricular courses like shop class or home ec class or art class or music class, choir, drama, super important that when we look at educating holistically, that we look at all aspects of one's self-expression, including that of art and music and expressing yourself through wood or metal, whatever it is that you want. And it is important that we look at the holistic child when we look at education. It is not just about the academics.
Yeah.
And I think if there was a better understanding that music improves test scores, for example, for those parents that are fixated on the academics, they would be championing the music programs. And I would like to take the opportunity in your podcast to acknowledge the phenomenal work and dedication that our public school music teachers have for their programs, for their students, for their communities. It really takes something to run a program. And all I can say is that the kids are super grateful for it. They talk to me all about it all the time, where they've had music programs where they could hang out with the music teacher, or the teacher had a guitar club where all they did was hang out and play the guitar, but there was nothing structured in it. Like
Yeah.
those are some incredible moments that people will always remember about high school is some of the connections that they made through music and the impact that music had on them.
What I'm about to say, I just want to let people know or make them aware that, like, I only say what I'm about to say because I want the education system to be better, and not just that, having learned about your situation and the situation of other teachers, I want the working conditions to be better. I want you to feel like you're living in abundance, not like, you know, I can barely scrape by. I really don't like to see that. And so I just, I don't understand. Many people will go to college or university to get a degree and spend six figures on that. No guarantee of a job. And in fact, most people will actually end up having to start at Starbucks or Tim Hortons if you're in Canada, or like McDonald's. It's just not. I mean, there's different systems out there. Europe's a completely different story, right? As far as getting an education. In fact, tends to be a better quality education over there. I remember going to school in Japan, and when I came back, I was like, there's like 2 or 3 years lag behind math class. Like Japan's that much ahead, generally, in many of the academic areas. I was no good at math. I hated it. But there's such a difference across the world. And I would just like to see things change. Again, it's not exactly the same, but when I was a music teacher or a guitar teacher, the thing I noticed was, like, certainly you can make a good income on a part-time basis, but it's still an illusion that you've got all this free time because it doesn't quite work that way. Because especially since you're often teaching somewhere 3:30 and 9, and you're
Yes.
still often driving to and from work. And
Yes.
if you're teaching at multiple students' homes, then you're driving a lot in between as well. When you
Yes.
finally make it home, what there's not a whole lot to do besides eat and go to bed
No, there
because
isn't.
you're pooped by that point. And so it's a good way to earn an income. Well, thanks so much, Maria. This has been fantastic. Everyone can find her, or you can find her at phoenixinspiredcoaching.com. We'll request that she puts the links in the comments as well of this post. And Spark Infinity, it's been another, we don't know how to end this ever. So I'm just going to hit end stream. And thanks for joining us.
Bye
I'll
bye.
see you again real soon.
Thank you,
Tomorrow, well,
David, Andrew.
tomorrow actually. Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Maria.
you. Bye.